striking in California, we often point to the San Andreas Fault. But did you know California actually has two pretty active faults?
I'm also nervous to bring up this next story. I don't want to tempt fate, but there hasn't been a big earthquake on the southern San Andreas Fault for a long time, and we may have found a reason why.
The San Andreas Fault has long been a symbol of nature's unpredictable power, etched deep into the landscape of California, silently marking the boundary between two massive tectonic plates. For decades, it has been the subject of speculation, scientific inquiry, and public anxiety, with geologists warning of its potential to produce a catastrophic earthquake. Now, NASA has added fuel to the fire of those concerns. With the release of groundbreaking satellite data and geophysical observations, NASA has revealed a previously undetected crack running along a particularly volatile section of the fault, an ominous sign that the long-dreaded big one may be edging closer to reality. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. Using advanced interferometric synthetic aperture radar INSAR and high-resolution satellite imagery, NASA scientists have identified a fracture pattern within the Earth's crust that aligns disturbingly with regions of intense tectonic stress. This crack, stretching along the southern segment of the San Andreas Fault near the Salton Sea, suggests a dramatic accumulation of strain that has gone unnoticed until now. Its orientation, depth, and behavior reveal a dynamic and evolving stress system beneath California's surface that could be approaching a critical threshold. The crack's discovery is not merely a geological curiosity, it is an urgent wake-up call. For years, seismologists have modeled stress transfer and fault interaction across the region, always concluding that the southern portion of the San Andreas is overdue for a major rupture. The presence of this newly identified structural discontinuity suggests that stress is being funneled into this fault segment more rapidly than anticipated. It's like watching pressure build inside a balloon that has already been stretched to its limit. The tension is mounting, and the release, when it comes, could be devastating. NASA's findings stem from years of cumulative data, but the most recent revelations come from satellite passes conducted just weeks ago. The precision of these satellites, capable of detecting ground movement down to millimeters, has allowed researchers to observe slight yet significant changes in elevation and displacement along the fault line. What they found was startling: a localized zone of uplift and lateral shift that did not align with any known surface faulting. This anomaly pointed to subsurface activity, hidden deformation that has now cracked open a crucial section of the fault's crust. Geophysicists have been quick to interpret these signs as a prelude to something larger. Cracks like these can indicate that the fault is unlocking, gradually letting go of built-up energy that has been stored for centuries. Alternatively, and more alarmingly, they can also signal a cascading destabilization of the fault zone, where smaller shifts compound stress and weaken resistance, paving the way for a much larger seismic release. The geometry and stress orientation suggest this crack is not a minor fissure, but part of a broader failure mechanism preparing to release energy on a monumental scale. The implications of such a rupture are immense. The southern San Andreas Fault runs through some of the most densely populated areas in California, including regions east of Los Angeles and areas near San Bernardino, Riverside, and Palm Springs. A full-scale rupture here would propagate shock waves throughout Southern California, potentially causing widespread destruction in cities and towns, crippling infrastructure, and resulting in economic fallout that could ripple across the country. More concerning still is the nature of this particular segment of the San Andreas Fault. Unlike its northern counterpart, the southern portion hasn't ruptured in over 300 years. Historical seismic records and paleoseismology studies show that this region typically experiences major quakes approximately every 150 to 200 years. That means the clock has been ticking for quite some time. Too long by geological standards. The discovery of this crack throws light on a dangerously overstressed section of the fault that appears to be nearing its failure point. NASA's team has emphasized the uniqueness of this event, not just because of the crack itself, but because of its associated geophysical signatures. The fault isn't simply showing static pressure, it's behaving dynamically, with signals of microseismic activity, ground tilting, and crustal thinning all appearing in recent months. This pattern is consistent with a pre-seismic phase, a window of time when the Earth's crust begins to exhibit warning signs of an imminent large-scale rupture. Adding to the complexity is the interconnectedness of California's fault system. The San Andreas Fault does not exist in isolation. It interacts with a web of other faults, such as the San Jacinto, Elsinore, and Garlock faults, all of which are capable of influencing one another through stress transfer and rupture synchronization. The newly discovered crack could act as a trigger, releasing stress not just along its immediate segment, but potentially cascading into adjacent faults, dramatically amplifying the scope and intensity of seismic activity across the region. This interconnectivity is particularly troubling because it introduces an element of unpredictability. If one segment begins to slip, it can cause a chain reaction. The energy released from one rupture can load another segment with additional stress, effectively pulling the trigger on a much broader seismic event. The San Andreas Fault has the potential to unleash a rupture extending for hundreds of miles, with a magnitude potentially exceeding 7.8 or even 8.0. In such a scenario, the shaking could last for several minutes, long enough to bring down structures, ignite fires, disrupt transportation, and sever utilities over a vast area. NASA's findings also have significant implications for infrastructure and emergency planning. The discovery of the crack has prompted a re-evaluation of risk models used by city planners, engineers, and emergency services. Many buildings, roads, bridges, and pipelines in the affected zones were not designed to withstand a quake of this scale. While some newer structures have been built to modern seismic codes, vast swaths of California's urban landscape remain vulnerable. This includes not only homes and businesses, but critical infrastructure such as hospitals, power plants, and water treatment facilities. The transportation network in particular is at serious risk. Key arteries such as Interstate 10, Interstate 15, and major rail lines cross the fault zone multiple times. In the event of a rupture, these lifelines could be severed, complicating rescue and recovery efforts and effectively isolating parts of Southern California. The economic impact would be staggering, not just from immediate damage, but from the long-term disruptions to commerce, logistics, and everyday life. There is also a growing concern about secondary hazards. A major rupture along the San Andreas Fault could set off landslides in the surrounding mountain ranges, especially in the transverse ranges north of Los Angeles. These landslides could block roads and rivers, create temporary dams, and increase the risk of flooding. Moreover, seismic shaking could affect reservoirs, levees, and aqueducts, raising fears about water supply contamination and shortages. The energy sector is not immune either, with oil pipelines and gas infrastructure at risk of rupture and explosion. The psychological impact on communities cannot be overlooked. Public awareness of the San Andreas Fault is deeply rooted in California culture, but the new data adds an unprecedented layer of immediacy. Residents have long been told to prepare for the big one, but the visible evidence of the fault literally cracking open is a visceral reminder of nature's raw power. It's no longer an abstract possibility. It's a tangible, observable phenomenon happening in real time. The crack is a line drawn not just in the Earth, but in the public consciousness. For scientists, the discovery is both exciting and sobering. It presents an invaluable opportunity to study a fault system on the brink of rupture in high definition, using tools and technologies that were not available during previous seismic events. Every millimeter of displacement, every microquake, every fluctuation in ground tilt adds another layer to the understanding of how faults behave before they break. This data is not only crucial for California, but for fault zones around the world. Understanding how this crack formed and what it indicates could transform the science of earthquake prediction and early warning. However, such potential comes with a race against time. While scientists are working furiously to interpret the signs, nature operates on its own schedule. There is no way to pinpoint the exact moment when the fault will slip, only to note that all the indicators are lining up in a deeply concerning fashion. The presence of the crack has shifted the conversation from if to when, and possibly how soon. Efforts are underway to enhance early warning systems such as Shake Alert, which could provide precious seconds of warning before seismic waves arrive. These few seconds can mean the difference between life and death, allowing people to drop, cover, and hold on, enabling trains to stop, elevators to halt at the nearest floor, and emergency systems to engage. But these systems are only effective if they are supported by public education and infrastructure readiness, both of which now face renewed scrutiny. The discovery also challenges long-standing assumptions about fault behavior. Traditionally, scientists believed that stress accumulated slowly and steadily until a fault finally snapped. But the crack suggests a more complex picture, one where stress can localize, migrate, and produce nonlinear behaviors that defy conventional modeling. This finding may upend decades of geological theory and lead to more dynamic, real-time models that adapt as new data becomes available. There is also a renewed focus on interdisciplinary cooperation. NASA's role in uncovering the crack underscores the value of combining Earth science with space technology. Satellites equipped with radar and LiDAR, when used alongside ground-based sensors and machine learning, can provide a multi-layered view of fault behavior with unprecedented clarity. This synergy could usher in a new era of seismic monitoring where changes are not just observed but anticipated, giving society the tools it needs to prepare. Yet, for all the advancements in technology and science, the Earth ultimately holds the final word. The San Andreas Fault is a reminder of our planet's constant motion, its ceaseless shifting beneath the illusion of stillness. The crack revealed by NASA is not just a geological feature, it is a warning, a whisper from the deep, signaling a release of energy that has been centuries in the making. Whether the rupture comes tomorrow, next year, or within the next decade, the evidence points to an inevitable conclusion. The fault is poised to move. And when it does, the landscape of California, both physical and human, will be changed forever. The revelation of the crack along the San Andreas Fault has opened up a completely new chapter in seismic risk understanding, not only for California, but for tectonically active regions around the globe. While the immediate focus remains on the physical characteristics of the fracture and what it signifies geologically, the ripple effects of this finding extend into numerous domains, from scientific paradigms and government policy to engineering, insurance models, and public behavior. One of the most significant scientific impacts stems from how this discovery challenges the accepted mechanics of fault rupture and earthquake initiation. For years, the elastic rebound theory has dominated earthquake science. Stress builds up slowly over time along locked sections of a fault, and when the resistance threshold is exceeded, the fault slips, releasing accumulated energy in a seismic event. However, the emergence of this crack and its precise location, dimensions, and timing indicate that fault systems might behave more irregularly, with stress concentrating in sudden surges rather than smooth, gradual accumulation. This uneven stress concentration implies that certain parts of the crust might be more prone to fracturing than previously modeled. Seismologists are now exploring the idea that faults can enter a state of dynamic instability well before a quake, creating cracks, bulges, and subsurface shifts that have more in common with pressure wave propagation than with slow mechanical buildup. In this model, faults are not simply passive boundaries between tectonic plates, but active nonlinear systems with emergent behaviors. The crack revealed by NASA may be a surface expression of this hidden complexity. Equally important is the implication for seismic forecasting models. Historically, probability-based forecasts have been used to estimate the likelihood of a quake occurring over specific time intervals. These models rely on patterns observed in past earthquakes and fault slip rates. But the presence of a new surface crack that developed outside the scope of these models suggests that historical averages might be insufficient when dealing with evolving geological systems. In response, researchers are pushing for the integration of real-time geodetic data into predictive algorithms using live satellite feeds, AI-driven pattern recognition, and updated ground-based sensor readings to refine forecasts on the fly. This shift could be revolutionary. Real-time modeling, powered by supercomputers and artificial intelligence, may soon allow scientists to identify potential rupture points before they fail, giving days, or in rare cases, even weeks of advance notice. While such predictions remain a scientific holy grail, the detection of the San Andreas crack has accelerated funding and interest in this research, as the line between theoretical modeling and operational forecasting begins to blur. As scientists probe deeper into the implications, government agencies are confronting the practical realities of what this discovery means. In particular, urban planning and civil engineering departments across California are reassessing their assumptions about ground movement tolerances. Many buildings, particularly in cities like Riverside and Palmdale, are situated dangerously close to fault lines now considered more unstable than previously believed. With the potential for ground rupture now demonstrated, the minimum setback distances from active faults may need to be expanded, and zoning regulations reevaluated to account for newly exposed seismic hazards. Moreover, the discovery forces a rethink of California's earthquake insurance landscape. Insurance companies, which use seismic hazard maps and risk matrices to assess coverage areas and premiums, are now facing pressure to reprice risk across Southern California. The exposed crack has redefined what constitutes a high-risk zone, possibly placing entire communities into newly elevated tiers of vulnerability. For policyholders, this may result in higher premiums or altered coverage terms. For insurers, the financial exposure could be enormous, as revised models might reveal underestimation of potential loss scenarios from interconnected fault ruptures. Simultaneously, California's infrastructure, especially its older legacy components, has come under renewed scrutiny. Bridges that span known fault crossings, some of which were retrofitted decades ago with now outdated technologies, may no longer meet necessary seismic performance standards. Engineers are analyzing how the fault crack could affect soil liquefaction zones, especially in basins where saturated soils are prone to turning into quicksand-like slurry during violent shaking. The potential for simultaneous effects, such as bridge failure, gas line rupture, and electrical grid overload, has reignited concerns over cascading infrastructure collapse during a major quake. The state's water infrastructure is particularly at risk. The California Aqueduct and the Colorado River Aqueduct, both of which pass perilously close to the fault, are lifelines for millions. If they are severed by fault rupture or ground offset, entire cities could face water shortages within days. The crack's emergence has prompted renewed urgency around building bypass channels and storage reserves, including underground water banks that can supply urban areas in the event of mainline disruption. Public utilities are also assessing grid resilience. Power lines, substations, and gas pipelines that traverse the fault may be exposed to fault offset that goes far beyond existing structural tolerances. The discovery of a fresh fault rupture line poses an unsettling question. What happens if multiple lifeline systems fail at once? Emergency planners are now grappling with compound disaster scenarios, including a quake that triggers fires, blackouts, and communication breakdowns simultaneously. Urban resilience plans are being updated to reflect this more holistic, integrated risk model. Even California's vast emergency preparedness infrastructure has not been immune to changes in response to the discovery. Regional disaster simulations now include more complex assumptions. Traffic jams due to collapsed overpasses, overwhelmed hospitals, and broken water mains in hard-to-reach neighborhoods. Emergency command centers are modifying their pre-scripted response plans, rehearsing new contingencies, and mapping out temporary relocation zones in advance. Some counties are also revisiting their mass alert systems to ensure wider and faster distribution of alerts across diverse populations, including non-English speakers and those without smartphones. At the societal level, the psychological impact of NASA's findings is profound. People who have grown up hearing about the San Andreas Fault as a sort of distant monster beneath their feet are now being confronted with tangible evidence of its awakening. This has produced a wave of renewed interest in personal earthquake preparedness. Sales of emergency kits, water filters, and home retrofitting services have surged. Public forums, town halls, and webinars about seismic safety have seen record attendance. The discovery has not just stirred scientific curiosity, it has activated public consciousness in ways rarely seen outside of a direct disaster. In schools and community centers, earthquake drills are being conducted with heightened seriousness. What was once a routine, almost theatrical exercise, drop, cover, and hold, has taken on a new gravity. Teachers are integrating updated geological data into their lesson plans, and students are beginning to understand the science not as a static textbook subject, but as a living, shifting force beneath their everyday lives. The crack, with its stark visual presence and strong implications, has created a bridge between the abstract world of tectonic plates and the immediate tangible world of streets, homes, and neighborhoods. At the federal level, NASA's discovery is triggering cross-agency collaborations not seen since the early days of the USGS Earthquake Hazards Program. The Department of Homeland Security, the Federal Emergency Management Agency FEMA, and even the Department of Defense are working in tandem with geoscientists to reassess national-level earthquake readiness. Special attention is being given to California's role in the national supply chain. The Port of Los Angeles and the Port of Long Beach, which together handle nearly 40% of U.S. container imports, lie within the broad impact zone. A rupture in the southern San Andreas Fault could not only devastate local infrastructure, but choke off critical trade routes for the entire country. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on NASA's San Andreas Fault crack findings and eruption chances? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.